Recording in.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Kickoff webinar for the Complete Neighborhoods Initiative. We're really excited to share more details about this new initiative at Mass Housing Partnership. And before we get into the details, I'm going to turn it over to Laura Schufelt to say a few words about MHP.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Christine. Just an introduction to Mass Housing Partnership. For those of you who don't know us, we're a quasi-state agency working with communities to create policy and financing solutions for affordable housing to better the lives of people in Massachusetts. And we do that in 4 ways. We have research on housing data to support policy efforts through our Center for Housing Data. Community assistance, the team that is hosting this webinar, we provide technical assistance to communities to develop and strategize for affordable housing. And our biggest department is our rental financing that provides permanent financing for affordable rental housing. And finally, the most affordable first-time home buyer program, the One Mortgage program. So with that and a short introduction to MHP, I'll turn it back to Christine to go through the exciting new program we are initiating today. Christine, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura. And I want to just give a little bit of a background of how we got here. So back in January 2021, the governor signed an act enabling partnerships for growth, and many of you might have heard about this called the Economic Development Bond Bill. And in this bill, it authorized $50 million over 5 years for financial assistance in the form of grants or loans to accelerate and support the creation of low-income and moderate-income housing in close proximity to transit nodes. So using that bond authorization, next slide, please. So MHP was named as the administrators of this bond authorization. And using this funding, we created the Complete Neighborhoods Initiative. And complete neighborhoods are livable, walkable, human scale neighborhoods where meeting your daily needs does not require getting into a car. These are also called 15 minutes or 20-minute neighborhoods. And you might have heard about these neighborhoods in Paris, in Australia, and even in Portland, Oregon. We believe that building complete neighborhoods is a systems approach to meet the biggest challenges of our time: climate change, transportation, and housing. These neighborhoods reduce car dependency by supporting development patterns that place opportunities and services near mobility hubs. Next slide, please. Through this program, we are tackling issues of housing, transportation, and climate change at their intersections by changing land use patterns and advancing our equity goals by removing transportation barriers to economic opportunity. Housing, jobs, education, shopping, healthcare, open space, and services are all accessible through transit, bicycle, and pedestrian networks. We believe that everyone deserves to live in neighborhoods that are rich in jobs, transit, and housing opportunities, regardless of their income status. Next slide, please. MHP's Complete Neighborhood Initiative, it supports Governor Baker's administration and state legislatures' efforts to build more multifamily housing near transit, jobs, and services. And the funding for this initiative is committed to 3 activities. First, the MBTA community zoning requirement for multifamily housing. And I'm sure that many of you have heard about this by now. We're calling this a 3ATA program. And my colleague, Katie Lacey, who is also on this call, will be overseeing this program, and she will be able to share more details at a future date. But today we are focusing on the Complete Neighborhoods Partnership, the second piece of this initiative, where we will be providing expertise in planning, community engagement, and pre-development activities within targeted districts to build local capacity and readiness for investment. And finally, we know that we can't just support planning efforts and technical assistance. We are also committing capital investments to get these projects built. So the capital investment will provide subsidies to affordable housing developments that contribute to the goals set forth in the Complete Neighborhoods Initiative. Next slide. And our initiative is more than just locating buildings or projects near transit. We're investing in strategies that will create land use patterns that tie development to mobility in a synergistic way at the station, corridor, and regional levels. The initiative will support the creation of mobility-oriented neighborhoods where housing, employment, shopping, and recreation are concentrated around a hub of diverse transportation options. These mobility hubs are places in a community that bring together public transit, bike share, car share, and other ways for people to get where they want to go without a private vehicle. We hope that the outcomes of our investments are increasing physical and economic mobility in these neighborhoods. Next slide, please. The initiative envisions a commonwealth where opportunities and investments are decentralized from our current hub and spoke system, and where networks of neighborhoods are connected by high quality mobility infrastructure. This means that each person's essential needs and amenities can be satisfied within their own neighborhoods, and if not, a short transit right away. We recognize that the model of complete neighborhoods may not be practical for a community on its own. However, the pandemic has pushed cities and towns to reimagine land use to prepare for a future where more workers will be commuting less and spending more time in their own backyards or neighboring towns. Many of the Commonwealth cities already have transit hubs and mobility infrastructure near places with significant development potential. We're committing our resources to improve connectivity between regional centers and their neighboring communities to expand economic opportunity for disadvantaged households. Next slide. So these are the four main goals of the program. We want to see increased economic opportunity for disadvantaged populations by closing racial disparities in housing tenancy and cost burden and gaps in homeownership rates. We want to create inclusive neighborhoods by building more affordable housing near mobility hubs and transit. We want to create dense, compact, connected neighborhoods by increasing walkable mixed-use neighborhoods with enough density to support transit or mobility infrastructure. And lastly, we would like to reduce auto dependency. Next slide. So the Complete Neighborhoods Partnership, the partnership works with communities to identify and implement strategies to accelerate public and private investments in affordable housing near transit and mobility hubs. We're really asking cities and towns, what is your recipe for success? And the four main categories of activities through the partnership are under community capacity building, so planning activities, inclusive and equitable growth, a very meaningful, thoughtful community engagement, and pre-development activities to get sites ready for investment, and lastly, implementation through financial analysis. And we're hoping that through this work, it will generate a pipeline of affordable housing projects near transit and mobility hubs. And all of this work will be done through third-party suppliers. We have consultants that are pre-qualified to do this work with the communities. Next slide. So all cities and towns in Massachusetts are eligible to apply. You do not have to be an MBTA community to access this resource. You can apply as your own community, or you can partner up with community development corporations or other community-driven organizations, nonprofits, or for-profit organizations. Also, you can apply as a single community applicant when we ask you in your application to identify one designated complete neighborhood to target the investments. And you can also apply as a regional applicant. So you would join forces with other communities near your community, and you can designate multiple complete neighborhoods. So in these regional partnerships, you would identify one community to serve as the regional center or the lead applicant. And for regional applications, you must document local support in all the communities in the application. Next slide. So I get some of the questions about what it looks like to have a regional partnership or examples of partnerships. But these are the three main types of partnerships. First, connected neighborhoods. If you're coming to apply as a single community applicant, you can identify one or more neighborhoods to expand your neighborhood connectivity. Next, you can apply as a connected region where you have a larger regional center where there is significantly more jobs and housing, and joining forces with adjacent communities, and have the regional center be the primary applicant. And third, you can apply as a connected corridor where you may have some mobility infrastructure like a bike network that connects all of these town centers. And still through this type of regional application, you must identify one community as the lead applicant. And these are some of the examples of each of these types of partnerships. So for example, in Lowell, it's a large city. And if Lowell were to come to apply for this program, they would identify multiple neighborhoods and talk about ways to boost mobility between these neighborhoods. You can apply as a connected region, like the Acton, Littleton, Westford, Carlisle, Concord, and Sudbury and Maynard region, where the micro transit Crosstown Connect service currently serves this region. And we will help you think of ways to increase affordable housing near these stations that provide mobility within these towns. And the other example of a region is the Franklin Regional TA system, where there are existing mobility infrastructure, not necessarily a transit station. Oh, Shelley, next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So the Franklin Regional TA system, where there's already mobility infrastructure that exists, and we want to find ways to increase development around these station areas. And lastly, a connected corridor, for example, the minimum bikeway that connects four town centers through a very highly used bicycle path. Next slide. So partnership expectations. If we do select you to be part of this program, we would begin by asking you to recruit and convene of local stakeholders for partnerships. Next, we would ask you to develop and commit to a 30-month work plan. And this work plan will be, we will actually look at this work plan through our equity assessment tool that we develop in-house at Mass Housing Partnership. And we would look at this work plan to determine the budget and the type of consultants that we would assign to you as a partnership. We ask that we meet regularly on a monthly basis with me, the program manager, and on a quarterly basis, we would meet with all the cohort partnerships for an opportunity to learn from each other. Next slide. So the schedule, the applications did open last week on March 1st. And today is the webinar where we're going to open up to questions that you may have. And then the applications will close on April 15th. And we hope to announce partnerships sometime in May. So when you are selected, like I said earlier, the orientation period is about 1 to 3 weeks. And then we dive into the work planning period for about a few weeks. And then we get into a regular schedule of meeting monthly, quarterly, and the program for each partnership will close out at around 2.5 years. Next slide. So here is the link for the application form. It is an online form, but if you have signed up for this webinar, I will send additional materials after the webinar closes to have a PDF version of this application form so you can see all the questions. But we do ask you to apply and submit online through this link. You can sign up for a mailing list for any news or announcements about the Complete Neighborhoods Initiative at this link, the second link, and MHP does have a website to talk more about the initiative on the screen here. And that's my presentation. And we do have some time for questions. And feel free to put them in the chat. Or you can raise your hand and we will call on you. First, MJ asks, will Connect Neighborhood communities have any extra priority for public transit resources? So that's a great question. We are looking to encourage more regional applications because one of our goals is to boost regional mobility. And we have been in close contact with other quasi and state agencies like MassDOT, MBTA, Mass Housing, Mass Development, to be part of this process so we can leverage each other's program resources. So you would be able to kind of tap into their resources depending on the type of work plan that you come up with. So it kind of elevates you to, gives you more visibility to these other state partners for their resources. Next question from Benjamin, how would you recommend regional planning agencies identify opportunities for either individual towns or regions? May RPAs prepare materials and submit applications on behalf of their member communities? This is a great question that I've been asked already quite a few times. So RPAs can also serve as lead consultants. They can be a third-party provider, a service provider for MHP. So because of that, we are not allowing RPAs to apply as applicants. But if there are member communities in your region that are selected for this program, we can start a discussion about how you can be the lead consultant for the community or communities that are selected. But I'm always open for more discussion around this. I think RPAs do have resources, for example, DLTA, that we could combine forces and see how we can leverage those resources and pair that with Complete Neighborhoods. Next question from Liz. Does the community need to participate in the MBTA TA in order to apply for the planning and pre-development and capital? The answer is no. You can be an MBTA community that is looking for resources to comply with the MBTA zoning requirement. And if you are selected for this program, we would find a way to work that, that effort into the work plan. So that work will be funded under Complete Neighborhoods or other resources that I think should be announced pretty soon. But being an MBTA community that is looking to comply with the zoning does not preclude you from applying for this program. Hope that answers the question. Allison asks, what level of existing transit is recommended or required? We are a few miles from the MBTA hub in Lowell and have some LRTA bus service. That's a great question. So we don't require you to have any level of existing transit, but in your application, and while you're thinking through the application, we really want to encourage you to think about regional mobility. So if your community is already close to a larger city that does have a mobility hub, we would like you to start that conversation with that larger city. So in this case, Lowell. I know that Lowell is already interested in this, to see how you can pair up and do a more of a regional scale work plan to increase mobility that will mutually benefit both of your communities and other communities in the region. And MJ asked another question. Is there any discussion about the capital funds to be accessible to smaller projects that typically can't make it successfully through funding programs that usually have a minimum unit number of 20? Yes, we have been discussing that. And so the capital funding is actually available through the typical DHCD NOFA process. So the developer would still have to go through that process, but if the request is made to have access to TOD funding, and in the NOFA, it's actually named TOD funding, it would actually be referred to MHP, and we're still in the process of finalizing the evaluation criteria for the funding that we're giving out, but we're not limiting, as of now, we're not limiting the unit sizes or project sizes. We do have a cap in terms of funding availability. And I know that my colleague Megan is here. And if you don't mind, Megan, if you want to say a few words about that.
No, I think you nailed it, Christine. I think that's exactly right. Regardless of what other sources of capital you might be looking for, you'll need to apply for this capital resource through the routine DHCD funding rounds. However, there is no requirement that you're looking for tax credits or that there's a minimum project size. And I think, of course, as part of the whole big picture, this Complete Neighborhoods initiative and effort is intended and hopeful to spark new development opportunities of all different scale that are appropriate to those communities. And we have 5 years in this program, and I imagine and envision it evolving through that time. And we will keep talking and thinking about the ways to help communities and developers access that funding in the best way possible.
Thank you, Megan. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Yeah, so MHP has a discretion on how we're going to disperse this capital funding, but of course you would have to be selected as part of this program in order to access this funding. That's kind of the baseline requirement, that you have to already have a participation in the Complete Neighborhoods initiative in order to be eligible for this funding. Okay, Marcella asks, how are the third-party consultants differing from the proposed lead consultants, or do they have similar tasks? So we have recruited a pretty large group of consultants in different areas of expertise in engineering, architectural, planning, community engagement, pre-development, financial, and we're calling them pre-qualified consultants. So depending on the work plan that the partnership comes up with, we would kind of pair you up with the consultants that would work best with that work plan and with the communities. And if we feel that there's a lead consultant that can kind of take the drive and take on maybe more of the work, then we would consider that as a lead consultant. So for an RPA, if they feel that they have high level of familiarity with the member communities or the partnership communities, and they can be the lead consultant and kind of drive the process. So it's really fluid and flexible at this point. We just really have to look at what the work plan is and use that to inform the type of consultants we pair you up with. Hope that answered the question. Feel free to put in follow-up questions as well, Marcella. Susan asks, is there any particular expectation about the size of the development or number of units? So we touched on this a little bit. There is no expectation on the size of the project, but within the legislation for this funding, it does require specific affordability levels, and I don't have those numbers at the top of my head. I don't know, Megan, you have those numbers? No, not really.
Yeah, I think it's 50, it's 60. I bet Laura, no, I'm like playing ping pong here. It's at least 40 at 60 or 50% of the units at 60% of AMI. It's a fairly deep level of affordability, not like unlike 40B that might only restrict to 80% of AMI. And I think it's 50 at 60, but I will look it up and throw it in the chat.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you. So from James, for the coalitions or groups involved in the regional collaborations, are there certain stakeholder types or groups that you're looking for ideally? The answer is yes and no. So ideally, we want to be able to create a work plan that is actually workable, that we can actually advance the work in the plan. So we're really looking for stakeholders in the partnership that is either a champion or have a history of success in doing the work that they do locally. We're looking for partnerships that can bring together a lot of political will to get things done. We don't want to just fund more planning so that they can sit on the shelf or studies or sit on the shelf. We really want to just move things forward, because at the end of the work plan, there is capital investment available for getting the housing units built. So we're kind of moving along this pipeline so that we're moving forward and not just kind of going in circles with some more studies and planning. So that's really the intent of the work plan. So you have a roadmap, your recipe for success right at the beginning of this process. See a thumbs up from James. All right. We have maybe about 15 more minutes left. Feel free to raise your hand if you have more questions or put them in the chat. And Maureen asked a question. Would assistance with creating a streetscape design for downtown be an eligible activity? I think we would have to understand how that meets our goals of the program. I don't want to say no right now, but if the design of a streetscape is part of a larger complete neighborhoods kind of vision, like part of creating more density around a mobility hub, I think I'm open to discussions about that. It's not a no at this point. So we're really looking for connectivity. If that design is actually improving connectivity to other neighborhoods or other communities in the area, then we can talk. Benjamin, to what extent may we leverage pre-existing planning documents, such as housing planning documents, open space and recreation plans, etc.? Do we have to create all new projects, or may we pursue funding for already identified projects? You don't have to create new plans. We're actually happy that you have a plan, and we really want to be able to get those recommendations from your plans and get them implemented. So if you, for example, if you already have like housing production plan that identify development opportunities, but maybe you just need a consultant to come and do some due diligence, maybe a phase 1 study, or you just need help writing an RFP, then this program would be perfect for that. Alyssa asks, does local support mean a vote from select board? That would be great if you can actually have a select board vote on this, but we are flexible with how you demonstrate that, and you can see that, you'll see that in the application that, it's either a letter of support that's generated through a vote of the select board, or you have a really detailed record of how much communication you have done for a specific type of project. So, public meetings or survey results to show that, your community really supports this idea. So we're really open to any kind of evidence that shows local support that is compelling enough for us to say, yes, they really want to do this, that there's real will to move this forward. Oh, Megan just put in an update. Development funds, minimum project affordability is 25% of the units at 60% or less of the MI. So Dorothea, she had asked me how soon is like this expectation we will receive the links for timeline application. So it's already available online right now through those links that I showed at the end of the presentation. And I will send an email after the webinar to everyone who registered with more links and materials and the recording, the link to the recording for the webinar. Oh, that was the last one. Liz, you had a question? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
I do. I have two actually. Can the developments that end up coming out of this be either rental or home ownership, or do they need to be one or the other?
They
I
can
mean,
be
not in the same unit, but okay, it can be either. And also when developing the partnership that's going to apply, you know, if we have ideas about different properties that might be ripe for development, do we need to have that owner or potential developer as part of the partnership? Because, you know, in early stages, they may not be ready to be looking at that, or it might be a situation. I'm thinking of one property in particular that used to be a church. I could see the current owner selling to a developer. I just don't see that connection happening before the application deadline. So like, do I need to have all the developers kind of as partners from the get-go, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we just want some indication that that either the property owner is willing to come to the table to discuss.
Mhm.
And if it's a private property, if you can show that you have some site control over it, for the purposes of, say, if you want to do a phase one assessment of the site, then if you don't have any site control, if the property owner is not willing to even let you do this assessment, then it's kind of a dead end for us. So we just
Sure.
really want some indication that they're willing to work with the partnership. But for to be a member of the partnership for the project, that's not required, it's not necessary.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? How many people do we have here? We have 71, that's great. Okay. I'm always available for questions. Give me a call or email me if you have more questions that I didn't get to at the meeting, or you just want to talk through some ideas of partnerships, or you just want to catch up on what I'm doing here at MHP. Feel free to email me at cmador@mhp.net. Put that in the chat. And like I said, I will share all the materials that I presented here in the recording of the webinar afterwards. And it's really great to see you all. And I hope you all apply and start making alliances and coalitions. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.